A girl who's mesmerized by a giant glass staircase in an Apple flagship store. The glass gleamed under the bright white light. It was the most beautiful staircase that Clara had ever seen, and she was determined to climb it. The problem was she didn't know where it was. She was an architecture student visiting the city. Her father insisted that she check out the famous flagship Apple store because he loved all that natural light and clean angles. But when she got there, she realized that the store was an absolute maze. There were glass walls everywhere, along with shelves packed full of MacBooks, iPhones, and iPads. There were also people everywhere. So Clara started to get a little claustrophobic, and she just wanted to get out. But then she saw it through the crowd. It was the glass staircase, the one from the viral TikTok videos that everyone was obsessed with. It looked so elegant and minimal, and the way it caught the sunlight made it seem almost magical. So Clara pushed her way closer to the staircase. She wanted to run her fingers across those smooth, glossy steps and see what it would feel like. But first, she watched as other people ascended the stairs. They glided up the steps one at a time, their faces illuminated by the soft overhead lighting. It looked peaceful and serene, like something out of a dream. And the whole time there was this soft chime playing. It was so calming. And that's when Clara knew she had to go up the stairs. When she stepped onto the first step, though, everything changed. It was warm. The glass wasn't cool or refreshing like she expected. It felt like a fever. And when she put her weight on it, the whole step pulsed faintly under her shoe. Then Clara looked down, and that's when she saw them. There were shadows moving inside the glass. People's faces were pressed up against it on both sides, staring out at her. But it was the eyes that freaked her out. They were soulless and vacant. They didn't blink. They just kept staring. And as Clara ascended, the faces got closer and closer until it felt like they were right on top of her. Some of the faces started to scream, but their mouths didn't move. Their screams echoed inside her head. It was at that moment that Clara wanted to run, to get away from the staircase and those soulless eyes. But she couldn't. Something was holding her there. It was like those last few seconds before a nightmare fully materializes and you can't move. And then the next step started to glow red. Not the entire step, just a thin line along the edge. Then the line pulsed again and spread outward until the entire surface of the step was red hot. Clara wanted to jump back down, but it was too late. The heat burned through her shoe and into her foot. Clara screamed, but nobody could hear her. All she could see were the vacant eyes staring back at her. The glowing red continued to spread upward, inch by inch, until the entire staircase was hot enough to melt lead. That's when Clara felt herself start to change. Her skin started to bubble and boil. Her hair turned to ash and fell off. Her eyes popped out of their sockets and rolled down the steps. But even though she was in excruciating pain, Clara found herself continuing to climb. The burning sensation faded, and it was replaced by a cold numbness. And as she ascended, she realized that there were still people on the stairs, except now they weren't human. They were made of the same glassy material as the staircase itself. Their limbs were contorted at unnatural angles. Their heads were twisted upside down, and none of them blinked. They just stared at her with those soulless eyes. Then Clara noticed the welcome mat at the top of the stairs. It said, "Welcome to the Genius Bar. How can we help?" With a hint of sarcasm, she thought, because that's exactly what they were going to do. They were going to be geniuses and help her ascend to the top of this bloody staircase. Except it didn't make any sense. The store was on the second floor. This staircase led to a basement. What kind of genius designed this? That's when she heard the voice. It was a distorted version of the cheery Apple music that played throughout the store. A raspy voice whispered from the speakers, come on, let me in." As she climbed, more voices joined in. They were all whispering the same thing. "Let me in, let me in, let me in." Clara tried to turn around and go back down, but the people made a wall around her. Their icy fingers dug into her flesh, pulling her upward. That's when she noticed the faces. They were no longer trapped inside the glass. They were coming out. They oozed out of the glass, dragging themselves up the steps to get closer to her. One of the faces turned around and smiled at her. It was a wide, gaping grin filled with sharp, jagged teeth. Then it spoke. Its voice was wet and slurpy. "You shouldn't have come here, Clara." She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, her throat made a clicking noise like a broken radio. Then the face moved closer. Its teeth scraped against her cheek, leaving a line of blood and glass. More faces emerged from the staircase. They clawed their way out of the glass and stumbled toward her, whispering her name over and over. That's when Clara collapsed. She was exhausted. The faces closed in and enveloped her body. She felt them drag her downward, back toward the bottom of the stairs. But when she opened her eyes, she was still at the top. In front of her was a shiny, featureless wall. But when she reached out to touch it, her hand went straight through. It was at that moment that she realized she never left. The whole store had been a trick. Those stairs were a trap. But what did it mean? Why did the staircase bring her to this empty room? And why couldn't she leave? Then she heard footsteps behind her. Clara spun around and saw a group of employees standing there. They were all smiling. They were dressed in black shirts that read, "Designed by Apple," in white letters. "Welcome to our store," one of them said. His smile was wide and inviting, but his eyes were soulless and vacant, just like the people in the glass. That's when Clara saw it. The glass beneath her feet was starting to soften. It was like watercolors bleeding into one another. She tried to take a step back, but it was too late. The glass absorbed her shoe and then her foot. It pulled her body down into the staircase. And as she fell, she saw the faces. They lined the glass staircase. Their eyes gleamed with excitement. And then she saw that one face, the one that had smiled at her with the rows of sharp teeth. It was right in front of her now, and it was smiling wider than before. Its lips curled up and over its eyes, revealing long, sharp fangs. Then it spoke, and its voice was wet and slurpy. "Thank you for coming, Clara. We've been expecting you." And the last thing she heard was the echo of that voice saying, "Designed by Apple. Built with you inside." A young man named Tyrell strolled into the Apple store. It was a bright, sunny day outside, but inside the store it was even brighter. The glass panels that lined the walls reflected the faces of passers-by who had paused to marvel at the store's eye-catching displays, or maybe just do some window shopping. But one face in particular stood out amongst the rest. A face that didn't belong. The face of a man named Tyrell. He walked right up to the glass and stared back at himself. It was almost like looking into a funhouse mirror. But when he blinked, the man in the display blinked back. So it wasn't a trick of the light. It was a trick of the technology. The display was a demo unit, a device designed to show off the latest features of Apple's newest iPhone. And what better way to show off those features than with a live feed of a real person? A little creepy, sure, but also kind of cool. Tyrell chuckled and reached out to poke the reflection. It felt strange, like touching a cold, smooth piece of ice. But then he realized that there was no need to be alarmed. After all, it was just a display. It couldn't hurt him. So he pressed on and began taking silly selfies, pretending that the camera was recording. He was alone in the store, and he had always wanted to see what the camera on the new iPhone could do. Was this supposed to be funny? Well, if it was, Tyrell was having a good time. He scrolled through the photos, each one more ridiculous than the last. Why did he keep doing this? It made no sense. Yet he couldn't seem to stop. He looked at a photo of him smiling directly at the camera and laughed. The resolution was crisp and clear. It almost felt like he was actually there. But then something caught his eye. A photo in the background of a familiar apartment building. He squinted to try and get a better look, but it was blurry. Who lived there? He thought about it for a moment, racking his brain trying to come up with an answer. But nothing came to mind. Then he noticed something else, something that made him feel uneasy. Thousands of photos. How could this be? Had someone else been using this phone? It seemed impossible, yet there they were. Photos of his apartment, his workplace, even his childhood bedroom, none of which he had ever taken. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the photos. Some were recent, others not so much. There were videos of him sleeping, his chest rising and falling as he breathed. It was as though every moment of his life had been meticulously documented. He could feel his heart beating faster. His breathing became shallow and rapid. What was happening? He needed to get out of there. Now, before he could think about it anymore, he dropped the phone and ran. He stumbled over his own feet as he tried to get away. But the phone was nowhere to be seen. He turned around and looked back. In the distance, he saw the reflection of the phone screen. It was still on. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. On the phone screen, he saw a live footage of himself holding the demo phone. His face was pale and his eyes were wide with terror. He was looking directly at the camera and screaming, but his mouth wasn't moving. It was like watching a horror movie, except this time he was the star of the show. He could feel the blood draining from his face. His legs turned to jelly and he fell to the ground. He tried to get away, but it was too late. The phone was everywhere. It was in his pocket, in his backpack, even in his head. He closed his eyes tight and wished it would all just go away. When he finally opened them again, he saw a photo of himself standing in front of the Apple Store. It was taken just seconds ago. But how? How could this be possible? Who did this to him? As he stood there dumbfounded, a smile appeared on the face in the photo. But the Tyrell in the flesh didn't smile back. Instead, he screamed. But no one could hear him. No one could see him. He was invisible. He was nothing. He dropped the phone and bolted. He ran as fast as he could. But the phone was always there, just out of reach. It taunted him, whispered to him, told him things he didn't want to hear. He could feel it in his pocket, in his backpack, in his head. It was everywhere. He needed to get away, but where could he go? Where could he hide? He was being hunted, and the hunter was him. He was the prey, and the predator was always there, just out of sight. He ran and ran until he couldn't run anymore. He hid in a park, curled up in a ball, trying to make himself small, trying to make the phone go away. But it didn't. It stayed with him, followed him, watched him. He spent the night there, too afraid to move, too afraid to make a sound. In the morning, the sun came up and with it, the phone buzzed. He knew what it was, but he didn't want to look. He didn't want to know. He stayed in the park for days, eating what little food he had with him, drinking from the fountain, hoping that somehow, some way, the phone would go away. But it didn't. It just kept buzzing, reminding him that he was being watched, that he was being hunted. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He had to do something. He had to make the phone stop. He went back to the Apple Store, hoping to find someone who could help him, someone who could understand what he was going through. But when he got there, no one listened. They just stared at him as though he were crazy. They couldn't see what he could, couldn't hear what he could. He was alone. He was trapped. And then he had an idea. Maybe he couldn't get rid of the phone, but he could get rid of himself. He went to the bathroom and locked himself in a stall. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself down. This was the only way. He had to do this. He took out the phone and dialed 911. He told the operator what he needed, and then he waited. Soon, the sound of sirens filled the air, and he could hear the voices of police officers shouting into their radios. He stepped out of the stall and walked toward the door. As he did, he saw a photo on the phone screen. It was a picture of the bathroom stall he had just left. The photo had been taken just seconds ago, and on it, the smile was wider than ever. He stopped dead in his tracks. He turned around slowly and looked back at the stall. The door was open now, and he could see the outline of the phone on the toilet. He stared at it for a moment, then picked it up and walked out. The officers were waiting for him outside, and as soon as they saw him holding the phone, they moved in. They arrested him without saying a word, and soon he was being led away in handcuffs. In the squad car, he told them everything, every terrifying detail. But when he looked at the officer's face, he could see that they didn't believe him. They thought he was crazy, and maybe he was. But as the car pulled away from the store, he saw the reflection of the phone screen in the window. It was still on, and on it, the smile was wider than ever. Later that night, after Tyrell had been released, his own phone buzzed with a notification. He checked it, and his face drained of color. The message read, "Thanks for testing our demo. Your device is now synced." He looked at the wallpaper, a photo of him taken just seconds ago from behind.